as a hiring manager, interviewer, and then also if they're candidates and they're SDRs, what it's like as well. And welcome everybody. Thanks for joining in. My name's Andrew Shapiro. I'm the founder of Dot Community, which is building the #1 resource to help people get better at interviews, both for the candidate and the interviewer. And we have Jack Knight with us, so I'm going to ask him to do an intro here in a second. But we are going to talk about, as I mentioned, interviewing SDRs and the questions that they should be asking interviewers and really hiring managers going forward. So really quickly, 2 expectations. Number 1, this is going to be sent to you. It's going to be recorded. It is recording. So thanks for welcoming. Come on in if you're watching it on demand. But we're going to send this out afterwards. And then also there is a chat. There's a Q&A, excuse me. There's a Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. If you have questions, we want this to be very interactive. So ask them. We're going to talk through them live. So locate that at the bottom of the screen, that Q&A button, and ask questions in, and we'll stop and answer it as we go. Besides that, it's important that we have Jack do a quick intro, and then we're just going to run right into things. So Jack, welcome on in. Tell us a little bit more about you.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. Happy to be here. Hopefully y'all get a ton of value out of this, whether you're on the interview side or the interviewee side. I'm just trying to equip y'all with the knowledge you need to crush these things and to make sure you're bringing in good candidates. So I'm Jack. I'm an SDR leader. Been doing that for about 4.5 years now. I'm over at Fourth. Great company. Love the people over there. And when I have free time, which I don't have much of, I'm coaching people on how to break into tech sales. So very passionate about this space, this industry, and what a career in tech can do for you.
Absolutely. Definitely hit Jack up. And that actually might be a good opportunity for me to maybe try and put this in the chat that Jack is doing a fantastic job coaching a lot of people in terms of getting into tech and a lot of other things. So what I will do is I'm going to put this in the chat for everyone. If you want to check him out, there is his link and you can get a little bit more information on him there. But let me just give you the 3 things that we're going to focus on right now. We're going to talk through, number 1, why is it so important to ask great questions as an SDR candidate? And why is it so important to evaluate those as someone who is interviewing an SDR candidate? We're going to talk into probably the juiciest subject, which is how to close at the end of the interview. And then we'll go through some questions from there. So let's actually start with that. Jack, why don't you tell us, like, from a candidate's perspective, like, tell us a little bit more why it's so important to ask really good questions during the interview.
Totally. So in sales, everything revolves around communication. Everything revolves around energy and engagement and fluidity, because what the hiring managers are indexing for is your communication skills. You're going to be cold calling prospects. And when you cold call them, you don't want it to be a very black and white transaction. It should be a fluid conversation. And so what hiring managers are looking for when they're asking you questions and you're asking them questions is that dialogue, is that fluidity. And if you can be someone that captures their attention, especially being remote, like all you have is this camera screen right here. When you're in person, you carry an energy, right? Everyone has like an aura. You touch people. It's easier to be a human, but to actually like capture their attention through a screen, that takes a lot of work. And that's why the questions you ask these hiring managers are so important, because not only are you showing them that you're different, that you're actually thinking critically about the role, but you're bringing a new energy. They're in interviews all day, back to back to back to back. And everyone is asking the same question. So if you can roll in asking unique questions, different questions with a different energy, that's going to up your odds of capturing their attention.
I actually think it's really interesting that you talk about that because, and I'll give you a little bit more of what I say in a second, but I didn't think about that. The tactical side of, hey, this person's talking to candidate after candidate after candidate. And a lot of the times what I'm hearing from people is, how do I stand out, right? Especially in the market we're in. And you just gave some really good examples of why it's so important, because it's a way you can stand out, which is asking these questions. And can't wait to hear your questions of what actually stood out for candidates as well. So the thing from my end is, do the job before you have it, right? And this is not just for an SDR role. This is for, it could be an AE or a customer success role. In any of those roles, all 3 of those are customer facing. So as a hiring manager or an interviewer, I'm evaluating what it would be like. I know what it's like to be on the phone with customers, and particularly our customers. When you ask questions and how you carry yourself on the phone, I'll call it executive presence, but really it's just customer presence. If you can do it with me, then I feel a little bit better, or maybe I don't feel as good. Maybe I understand, hey, I don't think you'd be able to get on the phone with one of our customers. And so that is how I'm evaluating you. And that really comes from the questions you ask. If you're in a customer facing role, no matter if it's customer success, sales, or an SDR perspective, if you can ask really good questions, connect the dots, and really drive towards impact, then I am more confident that you would be able to get on the phone with our customers. So that's why it's really important from an interviewer perspective to understand what kind of questions are you asking, what is that leading to in terms of a conversation and where that goes. So
Yeah.
anything else that you wanted to add there, Jack, in terms of the importance, whether it's from the candidate side or the hiring manager side, because you have obviously helped people on both sides, the
Yeah.
importance of asking really good questions in interviews. Anything else you want to add there?
You said the phrase do the job to get the job. That is the umbrella of how you're going to land these roles. And I
Mm-hmm.
get a lot of pushback for being a stickler on that because, well, an SDR role is entry level. How am I supposed to know all these things? Well, that's why we do these things. That's why we do this webinar so we can equip you with the tools, the resources. That's why I put together that free guide Andrew dropped in the chat. There's so many resources that will show you very easily how to be different, how to do the job to get the job. The reality is there's one of two people, either one who has the initiative, the drive, but they don't have the resources, or someone who doesn't have the resources and the drive, or sorry, they don't have the resources and they don't have the drive. So look, if you're someone who's kind of frustrated, you've been on the job search, you're like, man, all of these people expect so much out of me. I've never done this SDR job before. Take resources like this, go implement them, and you will see fruit from it. But I get a ton of pushback around doing the job to get the job because, like, oh, it's entry level. The market is way too competitive for you to have the attitude. Your attitude should be, okay, cool. I'm going to go talk to people who are already in this job and go get advice from them and go implement it. It's that simple. So, yes, I'm very critical about that kind of mindset that's like, I don't know how to do it. But I also want to be the solution as I'm calling out the problem and be like, hey, I'll show you how to do it. Come watch this webinar. Come listen to what we're talking about. Like, we're going to show you how to do this.
Love it. Totally agree with that. And let's take the do the job before you have it and move into the next part, which is the closing part of
Yeah.
the interview. Before we do that, just a quick reminder to everyone, if you have some questions, there is a Q&A feature at the bottom. Don't be shy. Please write in your questions. Jack and I will answer them as we go. Now let's get back to part of the interview, which is closing at the end. And I want to get your thoughts on this, Jack. I will start off with just personally what I think, which is why it's so important is because you're going to be doing closing in this role as an SDR and an AE, and sometimes as a CSM, right? And so part of it is the way that you ask. First of all, just having the ability to do it. Second of all, the way that you ask. And third, how you react afterwards, right? And so I'll just break it down kind of in my thoughts. One, before you make the ask, and I want to ask you how you word it, but for me, before you make the ask, think about how you're asking and how someone can respond. Of course, and it's inevitable that some people don't know how to give feedback, or they're not allowed to by their organization, or they might just lie, which is not what we want, right? But that's the reality. If you ask in a way that gives them an out, right? Like, what are the reservations you have about me? I don't know. I feel kind of spicy about that because it's like I might not have any reservations, but I'm also, you're not asking me if I'm going to move you forward or not,
Yeah.
right? People just assume. So, what is the way that you ask when, or what is the way you recommend people ask as a candidate? They ask to close the interview at the end.
Yeah. It's kind of a good, better, best framework. So, what's not good at all, like what's not even worth talking about, is just leaving the next steps open ended up in the air. You just can't do that in a sales role because every interaction you have has to have a next step or you're disqualifying that person. So again, going back to doing the job to get the job, same thing as an SDR, as an AE, you're always needing to anchor a next step down. So you have to do that. And if you're not doing that, if you're ending interviews like, okay, thanks, like bye, like that's not good. You're not going to progress in those interviews. But good, better, best. Good would be ending the interview with something like, hey, thanks for the conversation today. I'm curious, like, what are the next steps? Right? That's good. You asked, but you're losing like a lot of what Andrew's talking about is the how, right? You're losing like the swag, the finesse of sales just by being that blunt and that unexciting about, hey, what are the next steps? Better would be just a little more like well-roundedness around like, hey, really enjoyed the conversation today. I'm excited about the opportunity. I'm curious, would you be willing to move me to the next round? Or, you know, to Andrew's
Mhm.
point, like that question of, are there any hesitations that you see after talking to me? And so you're putting a little more into it. You're being a little more specific. That's better, right? And if you do that, the hiring managers are going to appreciate you trying to close the interview. But there's like a very tactful way to do this where you put your heart, you put your eye contact, your passion into it, and they can feel that through the computer. So the way I coach my clients to do this is you need to get like a little emotional for a second. So you just ran through a very long interview, pretty transactional, pretty standard. And again, it's going back to pattern interrupts. You want to be different. You want to send a new energy they haven't felt. So at the very end of that interview, like, hey, do you have any more questions for me before I jump out of here? Hey, I actually do. I've got one more question for you. And you context switch here. There needs to be a shift in the atmosphere of like, I'm being serious right now. Like, yeah, we had a great talk. We talked about some sales stuff, but like human to human, the first thing is direct eye contact. Yeah, I actually do have a question for you before I jump out of here. Look, I just want to say I'm very appreciative for the opportunity to interview with you. It sounds really exciting what you're doing over there. I do think I'd be a great fit, but I'm also a very blunt kind of person. I take blunt feedback really well. And I'd just like to ask you while we're here, just face to face, is there any reason you wouldn't recommend I move forward in this interview process, or do I have your recommendation to move forward?
Mhm.
Silence. Let the silence work. Make them respond to that question. One of two things happens. One, they're not going to move you forward, but they don't want to hurt your feelings. So they're probably going to say something like, hey, you know what? Like, I appreciate you asking. We have a lot of interviews going on right now. I don't really know where you are in the process, right? So I can't make a decision right now, but we will be following up with you pretty soon. That's like a very gentle way of putting you down and saying no. Or the better news is, hey, you know what? No, I actually really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for asking that. I don't.
Jack, we might have lost you there. And we do have a question coming in from Richard, which is great, but let me know when
I'm back. It's a different mic though, so
you're good.
whatever.
We can hear you. You're good. You're good. Keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, so I was just summarizing that, like, hey, the good thing that's going to happen is they're going to be pretty transparent and say, hey, you know what? No, actually, I had a really good talk with you. I think you have potential for this. I'd like to move you forward. Here are the next steps. So it's just a way different way to get to that result of, am I moving forward or not? But you're putting so much more into it where it's not just this like, hey, so what are the next steps? Or hey, do you have any reservations about me? It's a very passionate human moment.
Yeah, I love. So what I'm hearing from you is there are very important physical things that you do, right? You talked about like eye contact. You also talked about from a psychological perspective, the emotional appeal to it, and then saying, "Hey, I'm being open upfront, and I'm a blunt person. I want this feedback. Like, what is the feedback? You know, why wouldn't you move me forward?" And I think that is incredible and definitely should be used more because you know I both have been in interviews, and you are a hiring manager yourself right now. This is what you want to see from candidates. You're telling them, "Hey, this is what I want to see." And I would say similar from my perspective, similar vein is like I want to know exactly what is going to be the next step, right? So for me, like I've always been straight up like, are you recommending that I move forward in this process? Because I would like to hear your feedback either way. So, you know, I think that there are two different options there. They're somewhat similar, but what's really important is that you're being clear, direct, and then you also get to understand, right? If this person is giving you not giving you feedback, you don't move forward, maybe you don't want to work for that organization. You know,
Yeah.
there could be some hidden items in there as well.
And as
Um,
let's quickly add, as a hiring manager, I've had a lot of candidates that don't have any conviction at the end of an interview. And it just tells me like you really don't care. You don't need this job. You're not excited to work here. And it just makes me way less excited about your candidacy.
there you go. Right. That is so clear and direct and honest and transparent, and that's what we're looking for here. So, why don't we transition to talking about some of these questions? So, you know, you mentioned it, and you had a great post yesterday or earlier on in the week about adding some of these questions. So, I'd love to hear from you. Maybe we can go back and forth. If you want to start with one of your questions, and I'll go with one of mine. Like, what is an example of a good question that, as a candidate, you should be asking an interviewer or a hiring manager that is looking to hire an SDR, and give us the why. Like, why is that so good? What does that tell you? Because from an interviewer perspective, I want to know what good good candidates are asking like good questions and why that's a good question.
Totally. So your goal when you're asking questions as an SDR candidate is you want this hiring manager to picture you on their team. You want them to picture you on the inside. And most questions we ask are us as outsiders. We're like, what's the culture like in there? What do you guys focus on? Those are very like, they're detached questions. You want to bring yourself into that. And so an example of like, what do you guys focus on this year? A different way to ask that's being outside the wall. But if you're inside the wall, it'd be like, hey, so if I were to join your team over the next 6 months, like what are the big blocks that you're trying to move forward and how could I contribute to that? So it's that very like personal language of first person versus that third person detachment right there. So that's like the theory you want to go for, where you're trying to get this hiring manager to picture you in this role and them coaching you hands on. So that'd be an example of a question.
And so I hear a lot of the importance of this from an interviewer perspective is understanding and being prepared to talk about what those big blocks are in the next 6 months. Right. So for you, let's flip. Now you were talking from a candidate perspective. Let's talk about it from a hiring manager's perspective. You have to be ready for questions that candidates are giving you. And so you know in your mind, hey, here are the 3 or 4 things that I am focused on or that we're focused on in the next 6 months. But you also know, hey, I can only answer this for about a minute, right? Or a minute and a half because they have other questions they want to ask and I want to give them time. So do you kind of think through those? Do you have some stuff pre-prepared because you see patterns of what candidates ask you, or how do you get prepared for that?
Yeah, I think you nailed it with the balance of giving them a thorough answer, but a relatively quick answer. And if they want to press in more, they can. I think one, be real, because if they are trusting what you're saying and what you're saying isn't actually the reality, and they come into the role and they're like, hey, wait, I didn't know this was a whole problem we're focused on. Like, I didn't want that. Or conversely, like, hey, I wish you told me about that. Like, that would have been so exciting to know. So I think just be authentic with where the program is. But you don't need to over explain, right? Like you're hiring for a reason. You're either growing or you're backfilling. So you can be pretty transparent with that stuff. Like, look, I'm actually backfilling this role. Here's where the disconnect was with the prior role, and here's what I'm looking for in this next candidate. So you're just being very honest with like, I need this out of a candidate, and that gives them like a pitch right to their plate of, okay, are you going to validate that you're that candidate for me?
Love it. Love it. Okay. I'm going to actually put you on the spot here, Jack. We didn't talk about this, but I'm confident that you'll be transparent and give us your thoughts. And you won't hurt my feelings, but I'm going to give you one of my questions and I would love for you to say, hey, Andrew, that's trash, or here's how I would go about doing it. Or
No, come
maybe
on.
this isn't okay. All right. So let's pretend you're the hiring manager. I'm an SDR. And towards the end of the interview, I say something like, Jack, you said that you're looking for this SDR hire to bring in X amount of source pipeline. How does that sourced pipeline, how does that impact your success and your career?
I like it. It feels like it's a feel-good question though. So
Tell us more.
it just feels like a vanity question of like the only answer to that is like, yeah, it's gonna help me. I'm gonna hit my goal. So I like it. I just think there's a different way to ask it where it's a little more meaningful, where it's more solutions focused. So, hey, you mentioned you need this SDR to come in and hit this goal. What could you see as like a very big pitfall that your next hire runs into where they're not able to do that? So now that the manager is going to tell you their problem, like the pain, now you get to come in and bring that solution and be like, okay, cool. You mentioned like learning the tech stack's going to be really tough. Something I'm going to commit to is I'm going to go check out like your YouTube page and go watch a bunch of like customer stories, or do you have something else? So same question, right? How can I help you achieve that success? But you're drawing out pain that I have so you can go solve that pain rather than just like oh, I'm going to make you feel good.
Perfect. That is exactly what I wanted to hear. Honestly, I appreciate the transparency there. What I'm after with that question is if someone has asked a question like that to me as an interviewer or a hiring manager, I again can see this person do the job before they have it because I'm going to use your words, they're trying to draw out pain, right? They're taking their sales hat or CS hat, but sales hat, and they're asking this in an interview process. So I can see them do this job because once they draw out that pain, they can talk about it, what you just did. Or let's say that, after this interview, you don't hear from the hiring manager for a day, 2 days, 3 days, whatever it is. You can respond back to an email with not just, hey, just checking in, right? Here's the reason that I'm reaching back out to you, right? You said you needed to hire someone to do this job or by this time or whatever it is. So absolutely love that.
Yeah.
Uh, let's go to another question you have. Is there another question that you want to add in? Would love to hear what the question is and why you think it's so good when SDRs ask it.
I like being asked about training program and ramp for the same reason of you're actually picturing yourself coming into my team and you're thinking like, okay, what do I need to be successful? Right? The people who come in and ask the three questions that they always ask, it just is a red flag to me that you're about to commit the next year, 2 years of your life to a company you don't know, to a leader you don't know, a team you don't know, and you have three questions. So the people that actually put themselves in the shoes of being that new hire, okay, it's day one. What support do I have? Right. So just that very simple question of like, what does your training program look like? And how does the ramp work? That's one of those questions that, like you just demonstrated, puts me in the mindset as the manager of, okay, this person's actually picturing themselves working here. Now I'm picturing them working here.
Love it. Love it. And it's interesting because while we are doing the job before we have it, I think it's critical for any hire at any role to understand what is going to be the onboarding and how am I supported, no matter how you're asking that. Well, of course, if there are better ways to ask it, right? You just did a really good job of doing that. But it gives you an understanding as a candidate, which is really important. From a hiring manager perspective, if you're not asking about that, I'm a little worried that you're very assumptive, in my opinion, and you don't want to know maybe as much about that. And it's also important where in the interview process you ask about that as well. So absolutely love that. Let me
I'll give
have this.
you
Go
more
ahead. Go ahead.
easy one in that same vein, very easy one is, hey, look, I know no SDR team is perfect, no AE team is perfect with attainment, but I'm curious, like general attainment over the last quarter or two, where's the team at? Again, you're taking yourself seriously. You're not just asking about how's the team culture. No, like you need to get paid. You're a
Mhm.
salesperson, you're a CS person, you have goals, you have targets. Are they achievable? So I'm going to take you seriously if you're taking yourself seriously.
I would be worried if people are not asking about that. Again, across all three roles, if you're not asking about attainment on our team, I'm either worried that you're not thinking about it or that you're getting your resources from other places that may not be, for me, the source of what's going on, and you're not as interested about it. So not only do I see that as a red flag if you're not asking about it, but I also see that as something where I have to be prepared to answer that, right? We talked about these are good questions, and from the interviewer side, hopefully the hiring manager side, I have to be prepared to talk through this. And that whenever you ask that question, it's not just like here's the attainment, here's the number, and then you stop, right? There's more information you're doing as an interviewer to give actually more quality information there. So I totally agree.
Quick
Go
recommendation
ahead.
there from the interviewer side. I keep screenshots that I blurred out like names and stuff. So I can actually just do a quick screen share of like, hey, here's the team attainment. Like I'll just show you. And that is like the best way to show people because no one really does that. So if you're trying to secure good talent, show them your Salesforce, right? Blur out the sensitive details, but show them, put it on a screenshot, put it in a spreadsheet, whatever. That's going to speak volumes about the kind of culture you run and the true attainability of the role.
Love that. Yeah, there's transparency here. Let me do it in the right way that doesn't affect anyone else's privacy and stuff like that. Totally agree. Two things. One, before we're going to keep answering questions. Richard, thank you. I see your question. We're going to ask that in a second. So please continue to ask questions. 4 minutes left. Just before anyone takes off, there's going to be a survey that comes up on your screen afterwards. If you could fill out what we can do better next time or what went well, that would help us. We want to make sure we're giving value back to you. The other thing is we have a great question that came in. So this comes from Richard, and I'm assuming this is talking about new SDRs in the interview perspective here. So what's a mistake SDRs make in these interviews that could be avoided at all costs?
Yeah. So in the interview specifically, is coming in with one or two questions or coming in with the same three questions everyone else has. So in the guide that Andrew's sharing that I put together, you'll see a list of, I think it's 7, 8 questions. You can use those, and those are going to be very different from what other candidates are asking. It's going to help you stand out. Again, if you only ask 1, 2, 3 questions, you're showing me you're not very business savvy. You're not actually thinking of yourself in this role in real time. So if that was a question like what do new SDRs need to avoid, avoid coming in with no questions or the same 3 questions everyone else does.
Love it. I would say, yeah, actually, I do agree with a lot what you say. I was going to move in a different direction, which is a lot of people, unfortunately, don't do as much research as they should, and then show that in asking questions, right? Like preface the question that you're asking with the research that you've done. Whether that is about, let's just take you, Jack, for example, like fourth, right? Like how long you've been there, what you've accomplished, what other people, what you've been posting about. Those are things that are all publicly available. And if you can preface your question with that and then ask an impactful question that's open ended and allows them to talk and then dig deeper, right? These are layered questions. I think that brings a completely different dynamic and helps you stick out as well. So I would avoid the mistake of not doing research and blending it into the questions that you ask as well.
This goes full circle to the very beginning where we were talking about, look, a lot of people say, hey, this is unfair. I shouldn't have to put this much work into a job interview. Well, look, do you like not having a job or do you want a job? It's that simple. Here are free resources. Here's what you need to go do. ChatGPT 4, you can put in a LinkedIn profile, a company, whatever, and say, hey, I'm preparing for an interview. Tell me how to prepare. It'll give you facts. Like there are so many resources out there. And if you want to remain a victim and blame everyone else for you not getting a job, then I can't help you. But if you are hungry to learn and grow and you want to be equipped and you want resources, that's where Dot Community comes in. That's where Stuff I'm Doing comes in. There's so many resources out there. So don't be a victim. You are way more than a victim. You are a victor.
Victor, for sure. So I love that. I'm going to add in the chat for anyone. Here's Jack's LinkedIn. So if you want to reach out to him, please do. We added in the link for how he coaches candidates. I think he's an overall great resource. As you can see today, there are so many great things that he shared, but I just want to thank everyone for coming in today. I'll stay online here for a few more minutes to answer any questions. Jack, I don't know if you have to jump or not. We can definitely stay on for any more questions, but thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Hope that this was helpful, and we hope you have a great rest of your week. Thank you so much. Any questions, you can use that chat functionality at the bottom of the screen.
Andrew, I'm going to
Give
go
some people
jump out of here. So let me know if anyone has
Go
any
ahead.
questions for me. Happy to help.
I
Hit me
will.
up.
Sounds
All right.
good. Good to see you, man.
Thanks, y'all.